Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a somewhat remarkable event in Parliament last week as MPs and indeed the Speaker of the House of Commons made a stand, a fairly robust one, against one of Boris Johnson's lies in the previous Prime Minister's questions. Something that some will say, oh, this should have happened some time ago, and some will hope it's the start of a fight back against these lies. But will it? And indeed, could it? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to have to come at this from a bit of a distance away. Prime Minister's questions. This is the opportunity for MPs of all parties to, as the name suggests, question the Prime Minister about past, present and future policy. It is the Prime Minister's opportunity to justify their policy choices to the public as well. That all sounds delightful. But in reality, Prime Minister's questions is generally a thorn in the side of the government. It is actually an opportunity for opposition MPs and occasionally the odd rebel MP on the government side to trip the Prime Minister up. It's for this reason that I don't normally complain about evasion or spin on the part of a Prime Minister, whether they be Labour or more usually Conservative. It's just the consequence of party politics. But over the past 10 years, it's become more than that. So, I mean, for all the talk about Boris Johnson's dishonesty, it's really David Cameron that began this sort of thing. Not content with simply trying to evade difficult questions, which all Prime Ministers will seek to do, or at the very least put his own spin on policies, or maybe because he just lacks the mental agility to do so, he would simply tell straight lies. Now, not in Prime Minister's questions themselves. You know, he wouldn't lie in Parliament directly, but out amongst the public he would. And I don't mean misleading statements, but actually things that, you know, when you look at it are objectively true, you've just missed out something or you've presented it in a way that gives a false impression. But he actually just made up things that were objectively false. On a number of occasions he received complaints from the Office for National Statistics about these lies. But those lies were generally told outside Parliament. He didn't want to be caught lying in Parliament itself, where there are supposed to be consequences. This continued with Theresa May. In 2017, the general election, Jeremy Corbyn complained to Downing Street about the use of lies from May and her campaign team. The response was that it was up to Labour to call them out. They didn't deny that the Conservatives were telling lies, simply saying that there was no penalty for doing so, and if the opposition didn't like it, then they should do something about it. It's their responsibility. But neither of the two previous Prime Ministers have anything on Boris Johnson. Whereas Cameron and May would be certainly hesitant about lying to Parliament. They wouldn't want to be caught out deliberately misleading Parliament. Rather, they'd fall back on the time-honoured tradition of muddying the waters with misleading but not necessarily false statements. Johnson would just lie. He thought nothing of even contradicting himself with mutually exclusive statements in the same session, sometimes in the same sentence. He didn't care. He was the beneficiary of a greatly polarised nation, thanks to the machinations of Brexit, which basically mean that too many people identify themselves with a side. That's what this is now. That's what politics is. You're on a side. And a little bit like football supporters, they attack savagely even a minor perceived transgression from the other side and turn a blind eye to ones from their own. You know the sort of thing, like football managers who think an opposition player pulled a disrespectful face and should have been sent off. Oh, they're bringing the game into disrepute, it should be punished. I saw it all. I've got the eyes of a hawk, you know. But one of my players fouled someone in the box. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the incident, so I can't possibly comment. And so Johnson spends every PMQs not just refusing to even come close to an answer to the question, but he will tell the most obvious lies. People have said that the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, is simply not holding the Prime Minister to account. They consider the way that his predecessor, John Bercow, conducted himself and recall that he robustly called the government to order. The new Speaker is no good, people complain. Now, I'm not going to say which of the two speakers was better because I honestly don't know. There are arguments for and against. What I will say is that people are not judging the two fairly, from the same ground. The Speaker is the Speaker of the House of Commons. When people think about John Bercow, they think of his last few years when he presided over a House where no party had a majority. Now, because the Conservatives did not have a majority, and indeed were split amongst themselves, the general view of the House was often not at all in line with the government. Bercow represents MPs, and he did so. When he exclaimed that Johnson's unlawful prorogation of Parliament was an executive fiat, he did so on behalf of the majority of MPs who were against it, but powerless to stop it. But Hoyle is Speaker under very different circumstances. The majority of the House backs Johnson, even when he's lying. If Johnson wants to shut down Parliament now, he doesn't need to do it unlawfully. His MPs will back it. If he wants a general election early, he can get it. The reason why the role of the Speaker was brought to great public attention under Bercow was because Parliament was so divided in those last few years. After all, he barely registered on most people's radars during the more stable Conservative Lib Dem coalition years. So I'm not saying that Sir Lindsay is doing his best and there's nothing more he can do. I don't know that. I am saying that it isn't straightforward for him. I don't exactly know what he can and should do about this particular situation. I'm not an expert on Erskine May, which is the tome of parliamentary standards and conventions that is supposed to guide the Speaker's duty. What we have here, if not unprecedented, then at least is not within my experience. A Prime Minister who is not simply dishonest, but an outrageous liar who does not consider himself to be answerable for Parliament. Even Prime Ministers that some of us would have regarded as being terrible, they didn't set themselves above Parliament. Johnson is a wannabe autocrat. But, it seemed there are limits, because last week Johnson twice claimed that Labour had voted against a pay rise of nurses. Now, in the grand scheme of lies, I wouldn't have thought that was a more egregious lie than some of the others he's told over the months, or even in that day. But this was one that was objectively untrue, and Labour MPs raised it as a point of order later in the proceedings. It was also a very easy one to prove that it was untrue. Because of this, the Speaker backed them up. At the end of the day, Boris Johnson was talking about a vote in Parliament. The records are right there. The Speaker was able to say, yeah, this was basically untrue. But that wasn't enough, because if any minister misleads the House, whether deliberately or not, and it's always assumed to be inadvertent, you're not allowed to accuse a member of deliberately lying, then convention stipulates that they attend the House as soon as it's practicable in order to correct the record. Johnson has not done so. Of course not. He has never done so. So the following day, last Thursday, the Speaker made a statement, and I quote, "All members should correct the record if they make an inaccurate statement to the House. The government's own ministerial code could not be clearer about what is expected of ministers." The part of the code referred to and written by Boris Johnson himself says, "It is of paramount importance that ministers give accurate and truthful information to Parliament, correcting any inadvertent error at the earliest opportunity." The Speaker later said that it is not dishonourable to make a mistake, but to seek to avoid admitting one is a different matter. Thus, the Speaker has made a fairly strong statement in the House that the Prime Minister is behaving dishonourably. And let us not forget that Starmer dropped a bollock earlier this year when he made an incorrect statement in the House. He explained his inadvertent slip, which you will either believe was inadvertent or not, but the fact of the matter is, later that day, he corrected himself. There was no doubling down. There was a clear statement that explained what he meant to say, but also what the facts were, so there could be no avoidance of doubt. But Johnson is not doing this. He doesn't need to. If Labour make a mess of something, the press will be merciless. The right-wing press will do so because he is their political opponent. The left-wing press will also do so because they are principled. Johnson gets away with it because there are no consequences. The right-wing press will back him because he is on their side. They don't like principles. What the left-wing press say is of little consequence because anybody who reads it regularly would hardly support Johnson with or without the lies. Take the grilling Nicola Sturgeon received from the Scottish Parliament recently. Interesting commentary from various people. So political opponents, those who don't support the SNP, are saying what a disgrace it is that she behaved in this way. Supporters, however, whilst not necessarily defending her behaviour, nonetheless say, well, she's at least faced the grilling, and doesn't it show how the Scottish Parliament is more robust than Westminster? No, that was my response, not at all. The reason Sturgeon faced a grilling over misleading the Scottish Parliament, and the reason Johnson has not in Westminster, is not because there's a fundamental difference between the way the Scottish Parliament works and Westminster works. It's the same. The reason is because Sturgeon does not have a majority and Johnson does. When Johnson did not have a majority, he did face serious scrutiny, but they melted away when he won his majority at the end of 2019. If Sturgeon had a majority, her grilling by the Scottish Parliament would never have occurred. And this is a consequence of any form of democracy, really. If the government is the same party, part of the same tribe as the majority of legislators, whether it be in Parliament or in a Senate, makes no difference, or just different words with the same basic structure. If the government and the legislative body are one and the same organisation, the leader will face no consequences for their misadventures, even if there are private misgivings, as long as they operate within the core values of that party. The only time you ever get robust challenges to the government is when the government does not control the majority of legislators. Another reason why proportional representation would be the way to go. Actually, there is another way. You have a press that seeks to speak truth to power. But we don't have that in the UK, so it's back to PR. Because the thing is that the Speaker can object to the way Johnson conducts himself. He's made a statement in the House. And he's actually called the Prime Minister to account before, and would no doubt do again. But he has no power over the Prime Minister. All he has the power to do, and the only thing he's ever done that's swayed Johnson from a particular line, is tell him to shut up. He's done that a few times. He can't tell him to answer the question properly. He can't even tell him to tell the truth. He can make a statement when it takes the piss completely. And that's it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.